Most of us don't wake up thinking, today I want to read the Constitution. Law feels distant, sometimes it feels heavy, something for exams or adults in black coats. But the truth is, law decides who belongs, who is heard, and who is protected when no one is watching. And that's why today's guest matters. He studied law where ideas are sharpened and practiced it where values are tested. An alumnus of St. Stephen's College, Harvard Law School, and the Harvard Business School. For me, he stands out amongst his peers because he's someone who made the Constitution feel less like a textbook and more like a living promise. In a world raised on Suits and Boston Legal, where charisma often beats conscience, he represents something rare. A judge who brought empathy into the courtroom without leaving the law behind. Under his watch, the judiciary opened its doors wider, literally and metaphorically. He helped decriminalize homosexuality, affirmed women's right to equality at Sabarimala, struck down electoral bonds in the interest of transparency, and upheld constitutional morality even when it was inconvenient. This is proof that the Constitution isn't frozen in 1950, it evolves with society, provided those interpreting it have both spine and soul. A progressive patriot and a jurist who believes that the law must protect the quietest voice in the room, not just the loudest argument. A role model who has taught us that power doesn't come from the gavel, it comes from the values guiding the hand that holds it. In I.I.M.U.N terms, he matches Shashi Tharoor's intellect, Karan Johar's riz, Ajay Piramal's calm under pressure, and General Ved Prakash Malik's unwavering commitment to Bharat. I told him when I met him the last time that, and I have this personal interest, as lots of people ask me saying, why do you do I.I.M.U.N? I keep answering saying, I don't think if I was doing business or any other field that I would get a chance to learn from the likes of a Karan Johar or a General Malik. Therefore, I told him when I met him the last time, there is one such other person that I wish to be associated with because I want to learn so much. He is a personal role model to me because I've seen his judgments not just shape sections of society, but society as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it gives me a lot of pleasure and privilege to be able to welcome none other than the 50th Chief Justice of India, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. Firstly, thank you for making it.
Pleasure to be here.
He's been in the middle of an incredibly busy schedule. I think he has more commitments now than what he had when he was Chief Justice. That's the number of interviews that you're doing, the number of people that you're talking to, and therefore making the Constitution more accessible. So in the middle of all of that, I'm very, very grateful, and also a family emergency that you need to tend to, that you've actually taken out time and you've come here. So thank you, sir, for doing this.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's just truly inspirational. Inspirational to hear Karan, and now inspirational to be before such a diverse young audience. I think it's truly, truly amazing to be here this morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And sir, let me start with the very first question. With the kind of institutions that you studied in, it almost seems that you were first-rate students, that you always finish first in class. Were you the Hermione Granger of school, college, and then university? Or were you a backbencher who used to sit behind and take it easy sometimes?
I was always asked to sit in the first row in school because I was extraordinarily talkative and I had a tendency of disrupting the class. So I was, throughout school, when I was in Mumbai, I was asked to speak. I was asked to sit right in front of the teacher so she could tell me, keep quiet or shut up, let others speak as well. And I was generally asked to sit next to a really tough girl student who had unrestricted discretion to give me a tight whack if I exceeded disciplinary norms in the class. So I wasn't in that sense, I was not one of those A grade students. If I got a B plus, my parents were really happy. But I think after the 9th, it turned for me.
And B plus has gotten you to be Chief Justice of India. So everybody who's getting B plus in school, this is where you can eventually land up at.
But, having said that, I must tell you this. It's not, people say that, well, I didn't attend classes in college and I yet became CEO of this multinational corporation. It doesn't work like that. I think, the values which you cultivate in school are critical. So I think more than just the grades, my parents stressed on the kind of values that we as children developed. They brought up both my sister and me on a footing of absolute equality. In fact, she had more privileges than I had at home. So it's really not about, whether you got those 10 on 10 or 9 on 10. My parents didn't stress out if I got an occasional 4 on 10. They just told me very quietly, you'd better do better next time. But there was never this emotional stress, this psychological stress. But we knew that we had to be diligent. And they always taught us to be good human beings, to be receptive to others around us who are less fortunate than us, to be aware of what life in our rural areas is like, to be of concern to people who worked for us, and so on and so forth. So those values were critical.
And today's conversation is all about values. So sorry, I'm digressing a little, but I had a conversation with your office, which I want to tell them about. And I was talking to somebody from your office, and she told me about a particular instance during COVID, where there was complete lockdown that had taken place, and your wife and you had provided for laptops for the children of the staff so that they could learn and educate themselves and be in touch with what is happening. And apart from that, you did a slew of things during COVID, which she told me about, and which I won't go on to articulate and perhaps embarrass you in a pleasant manner. But what I'm trying to touch upon is this, that kindness does not cost. And kindness at no age should cost, whether you are in school or whether you are Chief Justice of the country. What is your definition of kindness that you would want a 15-year-old who's listening to you to go back with?
Kindness is not charity. When you treat kindness as an act of charity, you look down upon someone to whom you're being kind. Kindness is all about understanding. And I think critical to being kind is the ability to stand in the shoes of the other person. That's something which I've carried with myself as a judge as well. So when you decide a case as a judge, you're deciding on disputes between spouses, between businesses, between the government and the citizen. But you have to step into the shoes, into the life of that citizen. And it's when you do that, that you understand where that person comes from. So for instance, you just spoke about, us having given laptops to every one of our staff during COVID. And, we had a large retinue of staff. Multiple kids working on a school homework or even during a school day on one phone which the parent had. How do you expect the child to receive education? Of course, we couldn't afford the laptops because at some point of time, you said it doesn't cost. My wife reminded me 2 months later that you have to now sit down and pay the bill for this because, the vendor has been kind enough. Please now ask, well, you have to write out a check, which was, of course, had to be found from my salary. But kindness brings you a great deal of upliftment of the soul. And I think uplifting our souls as we go along is critical to the way of life that we want to adopt.
And something that is also equally uplifting is our Constitution and the study of the Constitution for an organization that tries to create conscientious leaders across, where we want to create a generation, a citizenry that is much better than the one that I was a part of. The idea of Bharat, or the idea of India, and the idea of Bharat, which is enshrined in the Constitution, is, in my opinion, perhaps the best idea of Bharat. But I understood it much later. To be honest, sir, when I was in school or college, I didn't read the Constitution per se. I only read it much, much later when I had to interview my first Chief Justice, when I got embarrassed saying that, what if he asks me a question and I don't know? So I will say I had a very cursory glance, and by the second or the third, then I started reading a little more in depth. Why is it important for young people who want to be conscientious leaders to essentially study the document that is the Constitution at such a young age?
When we learn civics in school, the teachers basically tell you the provisions of the Constitution. Now, important as those provisions are, that's not the heart of the Constitution. The heart of the Constitution lies in the values which the Constitution gives us. The value of freedom, the value of human dignity, the value of equality, the value of liberty. So I do believe, that the way the Constitution is taught in our schools has to fundamentally change from not just treating it as a document or a legal document, but a living conversation, the conversation between citizens. So when we are young, our family is the universe, right? Because when you just about go to school and your parents, your siblings and your close friends, they are your universe. As you grow older and you reach perhaps my position now in terms of age, if not experience, the universe becomes your family. And the Constitution helps you bridge this gap between the family being your universe to how do you deal with life when the universe becomes your family. And I think that is critical because what does the Constitution tell us? It tells us simple things. In a class in school, when you disagree with a friend who is making a point in a class, that's what the Constitution tells you. How do you deal with disagreements? If you don't like the ideology of a person later on in life, but you still have to listen to that person with empathy and understanding. So the Constitution allows you to, in that sense, imbibe different ideas, different ways of life, different faiths, different ways of dress. And that, in a sense, is the very idea of India, a plural society, a society consisting of diversity, and yet a society which has remained one and strong despite this diversity, which is its strength.
And you spoke about diversity being our strength, and that there should be unity in diversity and not necessarily uniformity in diversity. Am I correct in understanding?
Absolutely.
And but to that end, sir, there was the CAA and the Citizenship Amendment Act. And in that, if I'm not wrong, it fast-tracks naturalization for all citizens, for all religious minorities from 3 neighboring countries, reducing residency from 11 years to 5 years. But it excludes Muslims when it comes to seeking citizenship through these routes, the CAA route. So you spoke about unity in diversity and not uniformity in diversity. You spoke about us all being brothers and sisters of the same country and about it being one family. So then, sir, why is religion being used as a criterion when it comes to citizenship policy is what many times a question comes. So what would your answer be to that, sir?
The issue is pending before the Supreme Court. And as a former Chief Justice of India, I don't want to hazard an answer for which we must necessarily await a decision of the Supreme Court. Right. But what I want to emphasize is this, that the one central feature that our Constitution tells us is about respect for all faiths, equality of all faiths, and even the freedom of conscience, which gives you the discretion not to believe at all. The Constitution is for believers, it's a Constitution for non-believers, it's a Constitution which accepts the equality of all and every faith. Ours is not a theocratic society, so there is no state-sponsored religion under our Constitution. But equally, our Constitution does not make it irreligious. Our Constitution is not an irreligious Constitution. It's a Constitution which is deeply aware of the fact that India lives in the faiths of every one of its people. And growing up as I did in Mumbai, the one thing which I learned from Mumbai was that my friends were drawn from a diversity of faiths and diversity of backgrounds. We all celebrated each other's faiths. And I think that to a very large extent created a very important impact on my mind later on as a lawyer and as a judge when we were trying to decide on important cases confronting, our constitution. So I think this is critical for all of us to understand the importance of accepting each other as citizens, irrespective of our faiths, and most importantly, citizens who would be governed by one law, irrespective of their faiths. I don't know if you have watched this movie called Haq, which was recently released. Now, Haq is about a judgment of the Supreme Court in the Shabano case. In the Shabano case, the issue was whether a Muslim woman who has been deserted by her husband would be entitled to maintenance. And the argument of the husband was that she would not be entitled to maintenance beyond that period. Our Supreme Court said that the same law applies for the award of maintenance to a woman who has been deserted by her husband, irrespective of the religion which she belongs to. So in certain matters, irrespective of what religion you belong to, look at the beauty of our Constitution. One person, one vote. When many of the Western countries, including the United States, so many countries in Europe, had not given an equality of right to vote to every citizen. India, at her very birth, in 1950, when the Constitution was adopted, we recognized the right to vote irrespective of caste, gender, education, religion. And that's a tremendous achievement of the nation, which I think we must be proud of.
Right. It is something definitely to be very proud of. And in a democracy as large as ours, with 1.4 billion people, and so very many expressing their opinions, like you did mention about some of the issues, and I do take to a very similar viewpoint of the answers that you give. But there are also very many others who may have a different opinion. And one of the things that the Constitution protects is free speech. But free speech can also be misused at certain times, is what one has seen in the recent past. What is your idea of reasonable restraint when it comes to using free speech? Because as a young person, we are quick to understand things from the algorithm, and very quickly we give in to a particular ideology, whichever it may be sometimes, and then we voice opinions which might be very polarizing per se. So what is the reasonable restraint when it comes to free speech? And the second part of the question, if I may, is how do we get out of the algorithm and make up our own mind as to what is actually right? Because these days, like I humbly say, that there is nothing left in the right and nothing right in the left sometimes, is what I feel. So how does one come to know where is the center and what is the truth?
Why is free speech so important? Countries which are democratic value free speech because if you control the right to speak, as they would say in a totalitarian state, that's when you control the minds of individuals. So any society which seeks to clamp down upon speech is a source of grave danger.
Right.
And that's why our Constitution has regarded the freedom of speech and expression as a vital value to protect democracy and the rule of law. Now, having said that, what you find today on the social media is the very fact that there is this proliferation of speech. Proliferation of speech also means hate speech.
Correct.
It also means misinformation, fake news, which can be spread, because everybody becomes a journalist, everybody becomes the purveyor of information. But my take on this is very simple. We must, as citizens, be extremely wary of any attempt by the state to regulate free speech. Once we allow the power to the state to decide what would and what would not go out into the media or into the public realm, we give the authority over information to the state as opposed to all of us as citizens. And that authority cannot be eventually given to only the state. So there must be a cross-section of institutions, Parliament, which makes laws, the courts which enforce laws, platforms themselves must be induced to become fair and reasonable and responsible in the kind of news which is proliferated. But above all, for each of us, I think my mantra really is this: allow a diversity of viewpoints to cross your mind, but don't allow the algorithm to control. Because what the algorithm does, as you said, is to give you more of what you want to hear. The algorithm never tells you what you don't want to hear. It's constantly telling you how good you are, and it's constantly telling you things which you are fond of listening to, whether it's your music, whether it's the kind of food you want to order, the books you want to read. So it's important for us to not allow the algorithm to take charge of our minds and our hearts. Allow different viewpoints, read extensively, and allow for different viewpoints to cross your path of learning. And then pick out for yourself where the truth really lies, because the truth lies between extremities. And it's in that search for truth between extremities that you evolve as a person, as a citizen.
And therefore, the ability to be able to discern what is right and what is wrong is something that an individual should do. And of course, they're the smartest generation. They've got smartphones in their hands and ChatGPT to answer questions. But it also is the role of the press, I feel, in order to be able to give a fair, nuanced perspective when it comes to issues that are happening across the country and the world. But sir, today, when it comes to the Press Freedom Index, India ranks from 140th in 2014 to now 159th in 2025. You've devoted an entire chapter in your most recent book to journalism in the digital age. A lot of parents and a lot of teachers, including my own family, sometimes they tell me, saying, Rishabh, all these krantikari sometimes don't put up all these slogans. I say I'm putting them up respectfully, so there should be no problem, and there's never been a problem, because the government also wants to listen to honest feedback. But the press freedom has decreased, is what a lot of people feel. Or do you think indexes like this are not a true reflection of Indian society as it exists today?
Rishabh, how you define press freedom has itself changed. When the printing press came into being, the freedom was between the press and the reader. When the printing press was evolving and you had newspapers, the audience widened. Then you had, of course, the electronic media, the television, by which your audience could reach out to. You could reach out to a much wider audience. Today you talk about not just millions, but billions of people by just one post. Now, the point of the matter is this. I do believe that you must understand why parents are wary of children, being excessively involved in civic affairs, because they want you to be a good doctor, a good lawyer, a good engineer, a good chartered accountant, a good singer, a good actor, or a good director. But it's important, I feel, for young people to partake and to participate in the public life of the nation. Because participating in the public life of the nation is critical to nation building. And we can't turn around. There are two paths which you can choose. There is the ease of extremism, and then there is the fatigue of indifference. And I think both are to be eschewed. I mean, you can't adopt either one of them. It's important that a younger generation also participates in the life of the nation. And that's what the Constitution is all about. The Constitution tells you, whether it's in terms of your quest for a clean environment, clean air is in Delhi that you now need so desperately. Delhi is choking.
And Bombay, sir.
And Mumbai as well, but Delhi even more so. So the Constitution really, in that sense, operates and impacts upon every little aspect of your life. The food which you eat, your right to say no. When you say that you have the freedom of speech and expression, the right not to speak at a given point of time is also part of your constitutional freedom. And it's important, therefore, notwithstanding all the noise that you have in social media, to retreat from the noise. The danger of the present and the present day that we live in is that we are affected by the extreme noise in the social media. Now, how do you retreat from the noise? You hear the noise, you pick up from the noise, and then you retreat and then ask yourself, where do I stand? But you must also have the strength of character to say that I don't have an opinion at this point of time. Too many of us think that it's, very fancy and it's with it to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to have an opinion on everything. And you must have the courage to say that I don't have an opinion at this point of time because I want to learn more about the subject.
And I think that's very, very important for us, because just to extrapolate it to school, and when we enter debates, when we have competitions, when we have mock moot courts, there are some law students as well. So when all of this takes place at that juncture, we are compelled in order to finish first, sir. And therefore, we are compelled to make an argument or a case. We are expected to present a case in a particular manner. And therefore, it's not acceptable to say, I don't know. That also stems from the fact that we only decorate the winner and we never decorate the participants per se. But what you said is a thumb rule in life which I try to follow in a small way, saying when I don't know, I just put up my hand and I say, I have not read the book, or I don't know something, or I've not read the Constitution, as when the first CJI came in and he asked me saying, have you read the Constitution? And I knew that was going to be the first question. And I said, I've not read it cover to cover, sir. But it's okay not to know, and it's okay to say that you don't know something. But in a culture where we only validate those who finish first, and those who claim to know answers to everything. Sir, it's easy for me to share this with them, but how does one implement it when you are in that kind of a situation where you are expected to win the case, where you are expected in order to finish first, and then somebody asks you something that you don't know?
At the end of 25 years of being a judge, I've come to realize that winning the case is not just what heals. Hearing a case is as much of healing. So it's not just in terms of the outcomes which you arrive at, which constitute the winner, but your journey, the fact that you listen to others, you understand their perspectives, that is as much a part of societal healing. A lot of people, a lot of disputes, say between spouses, husbands and wives, what is the dispute about? The dispute is not so much about, personalities which are incompatible, as much about the fact that you have not heard each other out. You have no time to listen to each other. And listening, therefore, the journey, so to speak, is as important as the goal. Very often, we prize only the ultimate goal of, getting your first grade or, getting your A+ or whatever. I got my A+ as well. But equally, in the process of failure, there was so much that I learned. And I think we need to understand that failure is as important as success, because it is through failure that you understand the path of success.
Very true. Very rightly said. Through failure, you understand the path of success. But the next part is going to be very interesting. So we can restrict movement now. Please, Anandi Stuti, we can restrict movement because this part is very, very important for you all. And I say this because we have with us the pleasure of having somebody like him talk to us. And so if I may give this as a small exercise, if it's possible, in 60 seconds to explain these terms with the best judgment that has been passed on these particular topics. Whether it is a judgment, whether it's a case law, or an anecdote that you want to give. When I say climate and environment, something that we talk about on a daily basis, what is the first case law, thought, or anecdote that comes to mind?
The case of the Indian bustard, the great Indian bustard, which is the largest known bird to planet Earth. And the GIB was in danger of extinction because of the power transmission lines which are being set up to produce solar power and transmit solar power. In the GIB case, we laid down that the right of every citizen to be protected against climate change is a fundamental right for every citizen. So the right to a clean environment is a fundamental right for all of us. We as citizens today hold the environment in trust for future generations. And from there you develop the principle of sustainable development, the precautionary principle, the polluter pays principle, and the principle above all of intergenerational equity, that the environment is not just for us today, but we hold it in trust for generations which will follow.
So mental health and dignity.
For the first time, we have come to realize that mental health is something which is of concern for every one of us. It's something which is crucial, not just to those people who suffer from problems of mental health,
right,
but each one of us has to confront some issue of mental health or the other. For instance, Section 306 of the Penal Code made it an offense to attempt to commit suicide. When the Penal Code was enacted in 1860, anybody who attempted to commit suicide was guilty of an offense. Suicide, of course, is not an offense because the person who does successfully commit suicide is no longer available. The Mental Health Act removed that stigma by treating a person who has attempted to commit suicide as a person in need of rehabilitation and care, compassion and understanding. And therefore, mental health has now become a point of focus right from schools, through colleges, through workplaces, to important positions of responsibility.
So when it comes to reservations and equality.
On reservations and equality, let me tell you about a case which I decided, which is a judgment called B.K. Pavitra. A lot of times it is said that reservations dilute merit. And my judgment in Pavitra's case is an answer to the argument that reservations dilute merit. What is merit? Is merit all about test scores? Is merit more because you have a higher mark on the NEET examination, or the IIT JEE, or the common law aptitude test for entrance to law school? Or is merit also to be defined in terms of inclusion? Getting people from those parts of our society who have not been brought into the mainstream of society. Getting people who would contribute back to their communities by serving underprivileged segments of society. A Dalit doctor going back to a rural area from which he or she has emerged to give back to society. So if you look at merit not just in terms of your raw scores or grades in an examination, but in allowing people to occupy important roles of responsibility in society, there you have an argument that reservations actually promote merit and they do not detract from merit. I know that this is not exactly very popular to say to some audiences, but I strongly believe in that.
But sir, as a counterpoint, some would say that reservations were not meant to last forever. That we were supposed to uplift sections of society and we were to make it a more egalitarian state, to make it something that is equal access for everybody by this point in time. Do you think somewhere between 1950 to 2025, we failed to address what the very law stated, saying that reservation was meant in order to uplift, and that did not happen, and therefore we are stuck in the cyclical loop of reservation?
Rishabh, can you say today, 75 years after independence, that discrimination against the marginalized groups in our society has ended? No. The answer to that is no. Look at the number of students belonging to marginalized segments of society who commit suicide in some of our most prestigious professional institutions, because they suffer from discrimination. The importance of reservation was not just to appoint more Dalits in class 4 posts, or posts of sweepers, but allow for more Dalits to make that evolution from the lowest to the highest level. And that evolution is yet to take place. Even today, so many of us belonging to large cities, we have cultural capital. Rishabh, the kind of English which you speak, that comes as a product of the cultural capital that you have. Having grown up in a city like this, having met with audiences, having gone to the best institutions, how many people are able to really have that kind of cultural capital? The fact of the matter is that marginalized segments of our society don't have the kind of cultural capital. The command over English, going to good coaching classes to get admission to medical college or the top national law schools. So can we say that discrimination has ended? And if discrimination has not ended, I think reservations are a key to promoting a stable society.
Therefore, reservations are a key to providing a stable and hopefully a more egalitarian society that India at 100 will eventually reach.
At the same time, there are castes in our society which have made the progression. And last year, a judgment of the Supreme Court laid down that you must now give the benefit of reservations to those who need it the most and exclude now those who have already made that progression up the social ladder.
One controversial thing to say is, I was born into a Jain family. We are a minority. We're considered a minority in a way. And there are a lot of provisions that are made for Jains per se. But I do state it, and sometimes to the dismay of a lot of people in the family and extended family and platforms, that I don't think that, like you rightly said, that there are certain communities like Parsis, like Jains, etc., who have benefited greatly. And therefore, they may not need the same kind of reservations that were put in place.
But there were no reservations for Parsis or Jains.
Correct, but when it comes to educational institutions...
The reservations were for the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and the other backward classes.
Not necessarily when it comes to the constitution, but I'm saying, like, say, for example, for an educational institution, sir, when it comes to college, like certain colleges in Bombay as well, where there is a certain quota that is kept if you belong to a particular religion or a particular community, per se. I do feel that people then on open merit don't get marks. The ones who've gotten marks don't get seats. And what then happens is that if you've converted B plus to A plus, then you get the seat. But I remember categorically finishing in the top 5 of HSC across India, but yet being on the last of the merit list, of the open merit list of my college, because there were so many quotas before me. There was a sports quota, there was a quota for a particular religion, etc., etc. So by the time it comes to open merit, and what I was mentioning, sir, is that it becomes difficult for civil society then in order to get there. So I'm not saying reservations only in terms of in the constitution. I was just elucidating the point from the point that you were making, saying that certain communities don't need reservations. I was saying when it comes to educational institutions, perhaps Jains or Gujaratis may not need reservations, in my opinion, to get to a particular place.
Rishabh, it's important that the audience understands where the Constitution came from on this subject. Our Constitution recognizes religious and linguistic minorities. So it allows for religious and linguistic minorities to establish educational institutions of their choice. Therefore, in Mumbai, you have institutions which have been set up by, say, Gujaratis or for Jains, or for a variety of other, by a variety of other religious groups. Why was this provision in the Constitution made? At the birth of the Constitution, the framers of our Constitution wanted to give this feeling of confidence to our minorities. Minorities based not merely on religion, but minorities also based on language. That in the free India that we were about to create, that you will not be discriminated against. So this was a very positive step which was taken at the birth of the Constitution to allow for religious and linguistic minorities a degree of freedom in setting up educational institutions to educate the members of their own community. One of the cases that we decided recently was whether Aligarh Muslim University would be entitled to the status of a minority institution. And in my judgment, I overruled an earlier judgment of 1968, which had denied a minority status to the Aligarh Muslim University, I.I.M.U.N. So you need to look at this not just from the perspective, I know that student who is deprived of admission because they don't fall into that quota, there's a heartburn. But you must also look at it from the broader perspective of nation building and the need to preserve the unity, the peace, and the stability of India. And overall, India can remain as a unified, a peaceful, a stable, and prosperous nation if the last person is brought into the mainstream.
And that is what the Constitution tries to do, which is what the last part that you mentioned, I completely concur with, that the Constitution is trying to bring all communities and marginalized societies into mainstream.
And we must therefore, Rishabh, stop thinking only about ourselves and think of others who are less fortunate than us.
Correct.
Count your blessings.
Correct.
While allowing for a greater latitude or space for others as well.
No, absolutely. And you are the best representation of the quote that I picked up from the Rigveda, which says, Swasmai Swarupam Samajya Sarvasvam, which is do more for others and do less for oneself. You are a living example and embodiment of that. But the Supreme Court at 75, a quick rapid fire that I wanted to have with you. They're clapping at the fact that it's a rapid fire, so they get to ask questions and not me. But, sir, one judgment you'd like to be remembered for?
There are a number of judgments. I would like to be remembered for the judgments which made a difference to the lives of individual citizens. A disabled student who came to my court, denied medical admission on the ground that she had 88% disability. We granted her admission to a medical college in Mumbai, was doing brilliantly in a government medical college here. So the judgments which really make a difference are judgments which affect the lives of common citizens.
There is. One judgment you wish had evolved differently, sir?
Not one judgment which I wish would have evolved differently, but one case which if I wish I had time to decide. That's the marital rape exception in our penal code. You know, if a husband rapes a wife, that's not an offense under Indian law. If a husband murders his wife, he's guilty of murder. If he assaults his wife, he is guilty of grievous hurt. But there is an exception to the definition of rape which allows for marital rape even today. I think that exception has to go, because no woman, by entering upon marriage, agrees to surrender her bodily integrity and her autonomy to her husband. Unfortunately, time ran short for me, and I couldn't decide the issue.
And I do hope that comes into effect. I do know that another person who is close to the organization, part of our advisory board, Shashi Tharoor, has championed this in Parliament as well. He's tried to take out a bill for this. But you got into law, sir, because of who? Or because of what, sir?
I got into law by accident. I was intending to be an economist in Delhi University. But the terms at the Delhi University Law College were to begin much earlier than Delhi School of Economics. I walked into the law college and never left the precincts of the law thereafter. But what's really sustained my faith in the law is the ability to be of good to others, to find a voice for people who have no voice in the system, to care for those who can't be cared for by the political system. And that's what the law does. The law asks questions. It's not content with answers from authority. It speaks truth to power.
All the rapid fire ones are getting applause. So when I say nepotism in judiciary, does this exist or no?
Well, of course it exists. How can I'm not a hypocrite. Nepotism exists in the judiciary, but
Correct.
it is not universal. And I think the importance of the age in which we live today is that people are asking questions. And we therefore need to reform the system by making it more transparent, by making it more objective, by changing modalities for recruitment of judges, to reduce the element of nepotism and create a sense of public confidence, because the judiciary is one of the most important institutions in the nation. And I think while the extent of nepotism is exaggerated, I think it's important to deal with it by reforming institutional structures.
Correct. And it's also important to ask those questions. Like I keep telling everyone, ask the questions respectfully, then you can ask any question per se. And sir, a couple of other words that are there. Article 370. What comes to mind when I say Article 370?
History and aspiration.
Okay.
A transitional provision which was made at the birth of the nation continued as a transitional provision for almost 7 decades. And therefore, this was a case where history had to meet the aspiration of a new and independent India.
Omar Abdullah comes to I.I.M.U.N in a couple of hours, and he's going to be speaking to the next batch of students. we'll play that answer out for him as well. But I get where you're coming from,
See,
sir.
it's our ability to disagree.
I know.
It's our ability to be patient with each other when we talk and listen, which defines the nation.
You know, I meant it in jest, but I appreciate what you said. So when I say role model, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Sorry?
Role model.
Role model.
Right, sir.
Role model, someone who you look up to, not momentarily, but through life, whose values sustain your values,
Correct.
whose values you identify with, and whose path you would wish to tread.
Has there been a role model in your life?
Several.
Right.
I don't think I can say there's been one role model.
Right.
When I was young, my parents, one person who has been a great role model was a woman who was a house help in our house.
Okay.
She worked in our family for 40 years. She was completely illiterate, but she taught me more about India and about rural India than all the books that I read could have taught me. And then growing up, there were other role models. My mother was a disciple of a very distinguished classical musician, Kishori Amonkar. And she would come and sing for my parents as a young artist, as she was in those days. And I would spend evenings just weeping, hearing that music. So she became a role model. And she gave me an autograph, which really I think I must share with you. And that autograph, you know, in my generation, we asked for autographs from cricketers and film stars. And so she wrote something which I never realized at that point of time. And she wrote, music musically leads to silence. And I think, you know, that's something which has stayed with me. The ability to allow yourself to retreat into silence.
And human beings are the best libraries, is what I've always felt. And the human beings that are in front of us are also libraries that are being built. And therefore, when I say the word youth, what comes to mind, sir?
Innovation.
Innovation.
The future of the nation.
And when I say India?
Diversity, inclusion, and a nation on the move.
Nation on the move. And the last one, sir. This is the second time we've troubled you to come in person and talk to the organization. When I say India's international movement to United Nations or I.I.M.U.N, what comes to mind, sir?
Now, I know that Karan said Rishabh, so I obviously have to say something else. I'd like to just say this. An organization which I have an enormous amount of respect for, because you've used your energies, your commitment in service of one cause, of bringing positivity, dynamism, and faith in the nation to the lives of the young generation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, this deserves a very big hamper, Stuti. Make sure the hamper is very big. You know, but sir, before we let you go, one of the things that I must tell you about sir is that he's written a beautiful book, which I've had the good fortune of reading. And there is much to learn from the book about the Constitution, but also about the fact that how one can deal with situations on a day-to-day basis. There are so many things that he talks about that can be extrapolated to one's life. Sir has been kind enough in order to keep 1,000 copies pro bono to be distributed to all of us who are sitting out here. So, thank you for that. And
I must tell you this. I'm not getting any financial benefit by the 1,000 copies because the royalty from the book is being donated in the memory of 3 of my best professors at law school. Professor Lotika Sarkar, who taught me gender and criminology, Professor Mulchand Sharma, who taught me contracts, and Dr. B. Shivramaya, who taught us law and poverty. So the entire royalty goes to the memory of my 3 professors.
He's not only not taking the royalty, one of the other things that you should know because he mentioned this, he's not only not taking the royalty, but he's also bought these books to be distributed to all of you free of cost. So anybody who wants a book, make some noise. Okay, fantastic. But sir, with that, I know that you have a flight to catch at 1 o'clock. And like I mentioned at the outset, in the middle of a family, guys, thanks. Somebody did it. But in the middle of a family emergency, and a spate of engagements. When I did speak to him and I requested him saying, sir, please can you come? It's our 15th year. We would request you to come. He said, Rishabh, I've given you my word and therefore I will make it. And that is why he's a man of honor, and that is why he's been our Chief Justice. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're so lucky, sir, to be able to have
Thank you
you with
so
us
much,
today.
Rishabh.
And as a small token of gratitude, can we get Abhishek to come and hand over a token of gratitude to Justice Chandrachud, please?